Hey guys, what's up? I'm Wilson Scr1be's, and I want to basically. This is a kind of a more of a casual video that's going to take a look at this specific petition that's on change.org. For those of you who are unaware, two individuals in particular, Monte Cristo and Harsha Bandy, a writer at Over.gg. Monte Cristo, of course, being the OGN caster for the Apex League, which is the Korean Overwatch League. They basically came together, put their minds together, and wrote this good petition, this honestly well-written petition that is specifically titled "Bring More Diverse Content to Our Overwatch." For context of this, the reason why this is creating a lot of outrage is because people are viewing this petition not as a straightforward request to bring more diverse content to our Overwatch. However, they're seeing this more so as Monte Cristo and Harsha using the influence of the professional scene to specifically push their own agenda on what our Overwatch should reflect. Now, this topic has been addressed many times, but I haven't really seen an unbiased account of this petition in particular. So that's kind of what I want to do. I want to address this petition, and I want to address it in an unbiased way. I want to talk about why people are getting specific ideas, as well as kind of like addressing some of the logic behind why some people are talking about this a certain way. So primarily, I'll break down this petition paragraph by paragraph, and I want to talk about kind of the key stuff in this petition as well as why it's important. So let's talk about the first paragraph initially. So the first paragraph is actually a really interesting method of creating a petition, which is effectively the first paragraph is them thanking the moderators of our Overwatch. So our Overwatch currently sits at around like 775,000, I think. Yeah, so around that 775,000 subscribers, which is honestly one of the larger communities on Reddit for the age that Overwatch has been around, right? So it's actually really impressive. So it is a huge, vibrant community with that aspect, right? So the first paragraph is basically just thanking them. Thank you so much for your work and your dedication, and thank you for keeping this as a thriving community. The line I want to point the attention to and what is most impactful about this first paragraph is not the thank you, but instead it is the last sentence. The last sentence is, "We make these requests out of our mutually shared desire to expose Overwatch fans to the highest quality content and conversation possible within the Reddit community." Okay. What does this mean? Well, this can be taken in one of two ways, right? So there's two ways you can read this petition. One, you can read this petition at face value, which is what this petition is intended to do, or you can read it with kind of the grain of salt, or reading between the lines of the context of this petition, right? At face value, what this basically is saying that they want to improve the quality of content on our Overwatch. I think that's something everyone can get behind, because there is a distinction between what they're saying is high quality content versus low quality content. So before we move on, let's talk about what that difference is. The main difference is high quality content is basically content which takes skill to make and is not easily reproducible. What I mean is essentially, I want to see content, high quality content. Is an example of it would be stuff like fan art, right? Which is something that actually takes a high skill ceiling to produce, right? Not everyone can produce good fan art, or fan art that everyone likes. So that is something which I view as high quality content. Another example of high quality content is, for example, analysts or written reports or written articles about team profiles and stuff like that. That actually involves a lot of research and is not something that is easily reproducible as long as you don't plagiarize. But in that context, right, it's content that's hard to produce, right, and actually actively contributes to the community in a beneficial way. So those are examples of high quality content. In addition, for example, producing videos, right, stuff like you produced your own mix, right, and like you produce your own SoundCloud mix or something like that. That's high quality content because it does take time to produce something like that, right? So that's high quality content. It's content that specifically takes a lot of skill to make, relatively, and also is extremely hard to reproduce outside of plagiarism. If we talk about high quality content, we also have to address low quality content. Low quality content is content that effectively is easy to reproduce, oftentimes has very little contribution to the community, And basically is realistically is just junk in a way, right? Stuff like this is effectively like GIFs, right? Play of the game GIFs, play of the game highlights, right? In most contexts, yeah, you yourself aren't spending a lot of time getting that play of the game, right? If play of the game is you, as Lucio, booping off 6 other people, and you decide, well, this is a really cool highlight, I'm going to put it on Reddit. That's an example of low quality content. Why? Because realistically, there are a lot of people who have been in that same scenario, right? A lot of people have booped 6 people off as Lucio. Yeah, it might not be, in the thousands and hundreds of thousands, but, it's actually a large amount. I would say it's a non-insignificant amount. People have had the exact experience. The only difference between you and them is that you have taken the time to upload that. Realistically, that's low quality content. In addition to stuff like humor posts, right? Like, for example, like today I learned, stuff like that, where it's like, realistically, there are many people who have probably the same realization. They just didn't post it. It doesn't contribute anything to the community necessarily, and at the same time, it's not valuable. So, an example of this on our Overwatch is the following. This is an example of high quality content. Why is it high quality content? Because one, it's took a lot of time for this guy to make, right? This guy made this effective, kind of like this sculpture, whatever, in Minecraft. Probably taking him a lot of time to do. This is not easy to reproduce. You can't just jump into a Minecraft server and be done in this in like a minute, right? You can't even do this realistically. This probably honestly took around like 15 to 20 minutes to realistically design and do this. This is actually an example of high quality content because not only is it contributing in a way, right? Because I think fan art in general is, enriches your experience, right? You look at this as someone who might play Minecraft but might not be into Overwatch. If you see someone create this, you actually might want to get into this, right? Because you're going, wow, that's awesome, right? Like, I love Minecraft. I love the fact you're able to design it. This is actually really cool. I'm going to go out of my way to go into Minecraft and maybe design something similar. That's actually promoting growth and in terms of building up content for the community. This is an example of high quality content. Example of low quality content are the next 2 clips on this list. These 2 are highlights specifically talking about the same thing. In short, Roadhog Hook is broken, right? The top clip shows Roadhog Hook effectively bugging out, right, swinging the McCree around. And the second one is basically a GIF of Roadhog being pushed across the map and pulling the other Roadhog with him, right? Reality is that neither of these clips really do anything, right? Because if they were using this in the specific context of, hey, guys, this Roadhog Hook is bugged, we need to fix it, that would be beneficial. I would say that's an example of high quality content, right? Where if, let's say, it was a sell post that's saying like, hey, Roadhog Hook needs to be fixed, and these GIFs were used as examples of how they were fixed, right? I would say that's an example of high quality content because, yes, you are actively contributing. Individually, these GIFs contribute very little to the overall discussion and therefore are classified as low quality content. So with that being painted out of the way, that is the face value discussion of high quality versus low quality, which we'll talk about later. So I want to give you that background. So when they say we want to expose fans to the highest quality, at face value, it means quality and content, which is easy, which is hard to make and requires effort to make, right? I think that's something everyone can get behind. Now, if you're reading between the lines, you may note that the 2 people who created this petition specifically are very involved in the competitive community, right? If you read between the lines, what does that mean? That means specifically they want to bump their own esports content. Esports content, because of of the way that current content is being designed, usually doesn't take the form of low quality content, right? It usually takes the form of people writing about the competitive scene, analysts specifically into specific games, right? Writing about teams and profiles, right? And all those are examples of high quality content. The majority of esports related content tends to be on that end, right? The majority of esports content, unfortunately, isn't really play of the games from professional games. That is an example of low quality esports content. But however, people might be reading this specifically as them wanting to add more, like, for example, match discussion threads and stuff like that, right? So that's what they are seeing, or the people who are anti this petition are seeing, and that's an important distinction to make, right? So currently, from the get-go of this article, we already can see where the division lies, right? Let's move on. Let's talk about the second one. So the second one basically is kind of just, a little bit about a background of why, why this petition has come around, right? They acknowledge initially that they're saying, we did enjoy this community at first because of its content. However, because of the fact that these low content, the characteristic or the inherent trait of low quality content is that it's easy to reproduce. the fact that there's a lot of these posts that like are repetitive and it grows tiresome, they don't enjoy what it is anymore, right? And I agree with that. I think a majority of people will agree with that. That seeing the same thing over and over again on front page is tiring. Why? Because it's not exposing you to anything new. You've seen this before. You literally saw this like yesterday, right? A good example of this is these two GIFs. I've seen the top GIF. The bottom GIF doesn't surprise me any more than the top GIF did, right? Roadhog Hook is broken. I'm not surprised about that. It hasn't taught me anything new. But the fact that these two GIFs are together is indicative of saying that, low quality content is repetitive and doesn't really contribute that much, right? So what they're basically identifying is they're saying that on average, 22 of the 25 posts on our Overwatch will be GIFs, memes, jokes, and Easter egg suggestions. Now, these are examples of low quality content. GIFs, memes, jokes, and Easter egg suggestions are things that probably everyone's come up with multiple times. The likelihood of you coming with an Easter egg that's genuinely innovative is very low. But hey, if you come up with an idea that you flesh out and it's like very studied and detailed, honestly, it's considered high quality. I would consider high quality content. But the majority of Easter eggs are saying like, oh, well, it would be really cool if we had this poster up, right? Which is like reality of the situation. Is like, did you design the poster? Did you make any effort to do any of this? If you're just suggesting it, that's low quality content because it took you no effort to do it. Most likely, someone else also thought the same idea, just hasn't posted it, right? So this statistic actually has some weight. Basically, the way they got the statistic is there's someone, a member of the content creating community called Captain Planet, who went back through archive pages and effectively looked at month to month. Was like looking at the front page of the main subreddit and was basically looking at the top 25 posts, which is the first page, and looking at kind of characterize these in certain ways. So this actually I think has some weight in terms of how credible this source is. So with that being said, the most impactful part of this paragraph is specifically the last sentence. We believe this stifles in-depth discussion about the game itself, the competitive scene, and a high-effort content that takes longer than 15 seconds to read or watch. Now, if you're looking at this at face value, you're seeing like, oh, they're listing examples of what they specifically want to see, right? They want to see more in-depth discussion. They want to talk about more people talking about the meta, right? Character balance and stuff like that. They want to talk about the competitive scene. Fair enough, right? And they want to talk about high-effort content that takes longer than 15 seconds to read or watch. So that last one is basically saying like, oh, they want to do non-GIFs, right? And the funny thing about this is they use 15 seconds like to read or watch. And they're not talking about and if you're taking this at face value, you're saying like, oh, they want to talk about long form writing, and that's easy to grasp, right? They're not talking about 16-second GIFs are better. They're specifically saying we were looking for more long form types of content. So whether that's long form written content or long form video content, right? So I just outlined what the petitions as at face value. At not face value, let's dig into each of those three cited examples. When someone says that they want to promote in-depth discussion about the game itself, they probably are talking about meta discussions, right? Meta discussions by nature are part of a overall competitive scene, right? Or game balance. They have a competitive nature to them, right? Because let's be honest, the average quick play player isn't going to have an in-depth discussion about the meta, right? He or she might not know enough about like numbers or balance. He might say like, oh well, this character's not fun to play, but that's not the discussion that they're looking for. They're looking specifically about hey, how can we balance soldier to be more competitive, right? And when you have meta discussions, the meta is effectively promoted by the highest level of competition in the game. In this case, it's actually talking about the pro scene, right? So if you're reading between the lines, you can actually read meta discussion and you can make the logical jump that meta discussions or balanced discussions typically are associated with the pro scene, because that's where you're getting most of your anecdotal evidence, right? That's where you're pulling most of your facts or your confirmation, right? Because if the average player says, oh, I think soldier is balanced, his opinion doesn't really carry weight, right? The only people who would carry weight are people who are quote unquote pros or the best at the game, right? And that's the opinion that realistically will carry the most weight. And effectively that's talking about the competitive scene. The second one straight up is talking about the competitive scene. So the fact that two of these three topics can in some way be used, and actually technically all three of them, right? Because as I mentioned before, esports tend to take the format of a long form of discussions, right? The majority of the stuff that they need to write about or produce is honestly going to take a lot of effort. That's effectively what it is. So effectively, all three of these can in a way be linked to the professional or competitive scene, which is kind of an issue because it effectively comes across as that Monty and Harsha are not pushing specifically for high quality content in general. They're specifically looking at a type of high quality content, which in this case is more competitive scene or esports discussion, right? And that's where the bias or quote unquote reading between the lines opinion is being addressed. So that's, as you guys can kind of see, this is where it starts to, people who are reading between the lines when they're reading the petition or reading it with a specific mindset coming in, are starting to get a little weary of what the true intentions of this petition are, right? And I want to talk about the content that's more than 15 seconds, right? Because not all esports content, that's not what the content is, right? At face value, that's not what it's specifically talking about. For example, Flame recently, who is a content creator, recently released, just a general overview of how to improve or how to play better, or kind of quote pro tips, right, on how to get better with each of the heroes or each of the champions, right? That is actually an example of long form content, right? High effort content that takes more than 15 seconds that isn't specifically esports related. It's just talking about how to get better at the game. That's content which you can get behind. So in a way, that's actually content that's actually included specifically in Monty and Harsha's petition. That's kind of, they actually like. They want to promote content which is going to create a discussion, right? How to improve you playing better. That's not an esports related topic that they talk about. It's actually effectively, just regular content. So that's something they want to talk about. So that is on their side, a discussion of the second paragraph. The third paragraph is where a lot of this crux of this argument and why the argument between Reddit, this turns into more down into an ideological discussion about where the functionality of Reddit and why it's important. So this third paragraph basically starts to talk about other kind of like side branches of the Overwatch subreddit that have different purposes, right? So they're talking about specifically, what they're basically saying is like Overwatch may have a lot of different parts, right? There's parts that want to talk about the competitive scene, parts that want to talk about the meta or balance in particular, parts that want to talk about, like VOD discussion or something like that, right? So they basically made the claim that yes, we agree that these subreddits should have their own role and they have their own role. They should still keep their own role. But the important part, as the theme shows, is actually in the last sentence. The sentence reads, intentional or not, our Overwatch functions as the primary face of the title for the vast majority of Reddit users, and we believe it should shift from a monoculture to a community that reflects the wealth of content that currently gets ignored. Breaking down this sentence in particular, this is where the ideological discussion really comes up, and this is where the split in, when people kind of say like, okay, this is what a split in the petition really starts to come up and become more visible, right? Primarily, the use of the word monoculture should be is already kind of a tipping point, right? When you use monoculture, you're not saying that our Overwatch is a reflection of all of Overwatch. You're saying specifically it's only reflecting a certain part of Overwatch, right? In that case, the way that they want to say it and the way that the article is specifically using it is. So this is where, and I'm going to clarify this. This is where kind of reading at face value starts devolving from where you can read inside between the lines, right? And this is where, honestly, I don't think that the petition was written that well. Maybe this sentence should have been worded a little better. It's because even if you read this at face value, you need to read it with the context, right? Because if you say like, okay, the monoculture, right? If you're reading this face value, what does that mean, right? Is it the monoculture of Overwatch? In that case, the subreddit is doing exactly what it needs to do, right? It's displaying Overwatch as a culture, right? However, you can't even read that specific word at face value. You have to read it with context, right? What is the context? Well, the context is outlined previously, mentions that Overwatch currently, the Overwatch subreddit currently is populated by a lot of low quality content. So effectively what they're saying by monoculture is that they're saying the monoculture of this is the fact that it's talking about low quality content versus high quality content, right? And they're indicating that this type of low quality content is not indicative of the culture of Overwatch as a whole, right? So that's where the differential starts coming in, right? And the next part of the sentence gets even more, it's actually even more contextualized, right? Because when they say it does not reflect the wealth of content that currently gets ignored, what that sentence is saying that high quality content is inherently being ignored, right? And when I say high quality content, I don't mean it in the context of what I cited as a definition of high quality content, right? Because as we see before, right, there's actually a lot of examples of fan content, right, which is in my opinion is high quality content, right, that isn't getting ignored. As we can see, a lot of these posts that involve fan content are actually making it onto the front page. So I would actually say that, high quality content as they're putting is actually not getting ignored. Only certain parts of the grand group of high quality content is actually being ignored. And that's where the contextualized version, and this is why the two views, and this is why I think that there is some value in people criticizing the use of this petition, right? Because realistically at this point, I just showed you a few examples of high quality content which is not getting ignored, right? So in that aspect, it's not a monoculture, because in this case, we have both low quality content and high quality content both being equally viewed on the subreddit. This is where, sorry, I just banged my keyboard, but this is realistically where people are starting to use the argument that this petition is not about the quality of content, but it's more so about the lack of esports related or meta discussion or stuff like that, competitive content, right? It's because they're not seeing, right? Because realistically, they're saying, oh, that's getting ignored. What they're ignoring is specifically long form discussions, right? And the vast majority of long form discussions typically encompass discussions on the meta, discussions on the competitive scene, and writing on the competitive scene. God damn it. Well, this is not. Okay, whatever. I exit out of that stuff. It will no longer pop up. But in that example, right, that's actually where the difference is occurring, right? And that's why that's why this petition actually is starting to lose some of its unbiased nature. It's because, as we addressed before, the majority of long form content has a tendency, not always, tends to be related to the competitive nature or esports related nature of the scene. There's a few examples, as we cited with Flame's example about how to get better at champions and improving champion discussion. I do think that casual players should have a discussion on balance changes, and that's also an example of discussion, but the vast majority of it is related to the competitive scene, as I discussed above with the three categories that they were talking about, right? So this is where it's starting to get a little tricky, right? Because what they're saying is that we specifically want content that's ignored, right? Or in this case, long form content to be promoted. Now, let's break down why this content is being ignored. The reality of the situation is this content is not getting ignored. It's just not getting traction. Ignored, I feel, is a very negatively connotated word at the end of the day, right? Because ignored means they're saying like, oh, no one cares about this stuff. Like no one in the community cares about stuff. Untrue. There are people in the community that care. However, I think there was someone who made a comment specifically why certain types of content get viewed more than others. And this is where I want to discuss the concept of easy to consume content versus hard to consume content, and why this is such an impactful thing on this, as well as why it will contribute to discussion later, right? Low quality content tends to have the same characteristic of being easy to consume, right? By easy to consume, I mean it's very easy to read, to look over this specific piece of work. It's very easy, right? For example, fan art is an example of something that's both high quality content and easy to consume, right? So the reason why it's high quality content, it takes a lot of time to design fan art. The reason why it's easy to consume is because you don't need to spend more than like 10 to 15 seconds admiring a painting, right? You can just look at it like, man, this is awesome. That's easy to consume content. And because of its easy to consume content, it doesn't take as much time out of your day. You're more willing to click on it. And by that, you're more willing to give it more foot traffic, right? That's important to know. An example of high quality content that's less consumed is an example like this video, right? This video realistically could go on for 30 minutes, right? And to watch this entire video and to truly appreciate it, you have to spend 30 minutes of your day doing it. The vast majority of people don't have that time. So this is an example of high quality content, which takes a lot of time to make, right? But also is low consumable. It's not very consumable because the average person doesn't have enough time to block it out. Okay, so let's go on to the other side, right? Low quality content tends to be, for example, like GIFs and stuff like that are easy to consume, right? They're easy to mass produce, and mass produce stuff tends not to take very long to do. Easy to do, right? Examples of low quality content that also don't take as much time to high quality content that doesn't take that much to read is stuff like, you know, like stuff where it's like list articles, right? Like, for example, Red Bull comes out with an article of the top 10 best players. Realistically, you're skimming through that list anyway, and it's high quality content because I guess it takes people time to compile these lists by looking at the top ranked players, and you're not really fact checking. Not saying, but it's like high quality content, easy to consume because it's like it takes time to compose the list, and it looks pretty good. But at the same time, you know, it doesn't take that much time to read because you're skimming it anyway. So with that being said, the logic is as follows. If you have two pieces of content, one high quality content, right, that's hard to consume, right, and in general, you can make the statement that majority of high quality content is hard to consume if we talk about long form in particular, right, versus something that's low quality content, right, but is easy to consume, right, because that's the majority of low quality content is easy to consume, right, that those are the true majority cases. You can say this the following case, right, and you can use this through anecdotal evidence, or you can reason out logically, right. Let's say, for example, you have something that's 10 times longer, right. We have a GIF that's 15 seconds long, and we have a video that's 15 minutes long, right? Already that's 10 times more, that's 60 times more time for one than the other, right? So realistically, more people are going to watch that 15-second clip because it doesn't take that much time out of their day. They don't have to make a commitment. So effectively, that's easy to consume because more people are going to watch it, right? Because of this, right, more people will watch it, right? So even if, hypothetically speaking, you didn't have a high upvote percentage for people who watch it, for example, let's say that 100 people watched this GIF, right? And only 50% of it upvoted it, right? And that basically means you get 50 upvotes on that post, right? So realistically speaking, that's not a great post because only 50% of people who read it felt like, okay, you know, I think this deserves an upvote, right? And this is also to exclude the other 50% not necessarily downvoting. It's basically, in most cases, people don't really go out of the way to downvote content. They typically just ignore it. So it's like 50% people who upvoted it versus 50% of people who just kind of ignored it, right? So in this case, we have 50 upvotes, right? And that's not a great percentage. However, we still have 50 upvotes. If we talk about long form writing, right? Let's say, for example, only 10 people, right? 10 people watch my video, right? Because it's long, right? And it's not accessible, not easy to consume by everyone, right? So let's say only 10% of like 10 people watch it, right? However, everyone agrees with the opinion, they appreciate my work, and they all upvote it, right? Even though in this case I have 100% of an upvote capacity, I only have 10 upvotes, right? So regardless of what happens of how much I've been able to satisfy my consumers, I will not get exposure because I don't have 50 upvotes. I have less upvotes, so effectively that other post will be above mine, right? What that comes across as, if you're just looking at pure upvotes alone, is that my content is being ignored, right? Well, yes, it is being ignored, but the only problem is it's because it's not easy to consume, right? So while the people who watch it are gaining a lot out of it, the truth of the matter is, you know, like, because of the numbers game and the way that Reddit specifically works, my article and my video will not get as much exposure as a GIF. And this is specifically what they're talking about. They're addressing that specific issue, right? So at face value, they're addressing that specific issue. But if you read between the lines, you're seeing like, well, what kind of content typically is this long form? And they're mainly citing examples of like esports content that is hard to address. Okay. And I do want to clarify, not all esports content is long form and hard to digest. Things like match threads, right? Match threads, for example, are realistically easy to consume and also, in a way, high quality, right? And they are part of the competitive scene and competitive environment. So this is a very specific case that I'm talking about, and it's not all encompassing. But as you can see here, this is where it's getting contentious, because realistically, what they're saying is that it's not, they want to give more of a presence or give more exposure to these videos and these articles which are high quality content but do not get that many upvotes. Now that's where the ideological difference in Reddit lies. Reddit as a forum functions primarily off of the fact that if people upvote your content more people have enjoyed it, and thus more people will in the future enjoy this content. So basically that's what Reddit operates off of, right? If you feel like this content is actually really informative and a lot of people will enjoy it, you'll upvote it, meaning that it gets more exposure, more people are willing to look at it, right? That in and of itself can feel like a statement where people feel like, oh, I put so much time in this content, I should get more exposure about it, which is where this petition is coming off incorrectly, right? Basically, the way it's coming off is that saying like, oh man, I spent all this time writing this esports article, no one is reading it, no one's watching it. It should get more exposure. And what that basically comes across as is saying, even though I am losing the upvote war, right? I did not get exposure to this article because my video didn't get enough upvotes, not enough people enjoyed it, or it's not easy to consume, right? Or actually, I'm going to leave out the consume part, but basically not enough people liked it, so therefore it's not getting traction. But in reality, this is like an example of like a high quality content that's actively contributing. We think that content like that should get a boost. You can kind of see where this argument is falling apart, right? Because if you follow the Reddit ideology, which is specifically only things that we want to see on the front page is content that the most people enjoy, right? The argument could be made, and it is currently being made, that esports in the context of the Overwatch subreddit is not enjoyed by the majority of the subreddit. Okay, that I think is an argument that's pretty self-explanatory, right? But I'll explain it nonetheless, right? Because content like that is hard to digest, and it's reflected in poor upvote values, people are misconstruing that specific indicator, right, as a satisfaction rate, right? What they're seeing is saying like, well, only 10 people upvoted this, obviously no one likes it, right? However, in the example I just cited was that actually I'm actually being a very good producer because all my consumers who've actually watched this really like it. So I have a 100% satisfaction rate, whereas that GIF only realistically has a 50% satisfaction rate. So in my context, I would say that actually my content is a better contributor to the scene than that GIF because I'm satisfying a higher percentage. Whereas the Reddit ideology is specifically saying it's about quantity, not quality. The GIF has satisfied 50 people, your content has only satisfied 10 people, therefore more people are going to enjoy basically the 50 upvote, right? And that's kind of where the ideology lies, right? Do you want to talk more about percentage of upvotes, or do you want to talk about quantity of upvotes? And that's where the differential is occurring, and that's why the discussion is important. So I do want to separate easy to consume, because that's going to be a point I'll make later. Okay, so after that long-winded discussion, which probably took longer than it should have, let's advance to this paragraph. Specifically in this paragraph, he is citing that they do not want to change the current style of our Overwatch. However, they're then using other competitive titles, right, which is starting to detract from the entire point of this petition not being biased. Reddit moderators have implemented rules where GIF and image may be a self-post, blah, 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 which assists greatly in reducing the volume of these types of media on the front page. We think that this tactic, combined with more stringent rules on title posts, to avoid the fad du jour, which is the fad of the day, on submissions such as this blah, blah, can open our Overwatch to a new breadth of content. So my main problem with that specific paragraph of the petition is that they are citing other competitive titles as arguments. They're citing our League of Legends, our Global Offensive, which is the Counter-Strike subreddit, as well as our Dota 2. Basically, these are all examples of subreddits which are the main subreddit of the community, but also function and have a competitive, like a large competitive following into this, right? So what they're saying is that throughout this entire thing is that they don't want, and people are saying that this is not about esports. However, the examples that they're citing are about esports, and that's kind of like where people are taking it, right? Actually, I would actually say it's not the same thing, right? What I would say, it's actually a discussion about how other subreddits are creating easy to consume esports content and what we can better do to, promote that type of content, easy to consume esports content, right? Because if we look at like Global Offensive right now, the DreamHack Open in Las Vegas is currently occurring, so I'm actually going to go on to Global Offensive, right? As we can see, there's a lot of discussion about specifically, discussion on competitive environments, right? Semler is trying too hard, right? Discussion about a specific caster, but FaZe Kerrigan, we decided to go with Nico instead of Scr1be's. It's all competitively formatted, right? And the realistic content of this is like, yes, there are some low quality content on here, right? For example, the stream highlight, stuff like that, right? So in Fluff, for example, there's a rare picture of XIBP and Cloud9. So this is actually like, examples of how we can produce easy to consume, low quality esports content. So that's what the petition is really driving at. The petition specifically is driving at the fact that these subreddits have found a way to incorporate the competitive community in a way that's easy to consume by the average subreddit. Now, there's a bunch of underlying factors. Maybe each of the subreddits is created by a vast majority of users who enjoy the competitive atmosphere of the game, right? League of Legends and Counter-Strike, by the way that they're formatted, is typically more of a competitive environment. I would say those games are typically more competitive. Like if you, for example, Counter-Strike's entire point is like if you want to play the competitive mode, which is a 5v5 format, you have to go into a competitive, you have to go into ranked, right, which makes it a competitive game. Same in a way with League, where they do have like a draft mode, but you're playing for rank. As specific if you want to get the full experience out of it, right, and you want people to play serious. So effectively, maybe there's an underlying factor where those two communities are inherently more competitive. However, that's like different. I want to acknowledge those factors going in. So that's where the petition is really trying to target, right? However, the fact that they're using competitive titles as an example is leading that other group of people who are opposed to petition to say, hey, look, this is a perfect example of what they mean by using esports. They're trying to push esports into the scene, even though, as we discussed before, the Reddit ideology of the main subreddit is that they believe that because a competitive content is getting less upvotes, people don't like it as much, right? And that's the ideological thing I just talked about. So that's where the contention is happening, because some people are misunderstanding, where people are the other side. One side is specifically talking about satisfaction rates, right? The fact that people who are in contribution rates, right? The fact that my content is actually contributing more to this the Overwatch scene means realistically this content should get more exposure. It's doing more for the community, which is a positive thing, right? However, some people are looking at it and saying, well, let's cut it out. Reddit is specifically supposed to be for the satisfaction of the people who are using it. Your post is not getting as much upvotes as other posts, meaning that people aren't satisfied with your post, right? And that's kind of like where the fallacy is starting to develop. So effectively, this is where the petition starts getting a little contentious, right? Because now they've outlined the examples they're using are specifically competitive titles, right? Maybe they could have phrased it more as like not competitive titles. Maybe they could have phrased it as like, like other subreddits of other gaming subreddits or other subreddits related to gaming titles, and maybe they could avoid this small thing where they talk about competitive titles. But effectively what's coming out is that this petition is starting to be viewed as less and less biased as we scroll down the paragraphs, because they're using competitive titles as an example. So I hope you guys got that. Last but not least, we have the last one, right? We love Overwatch. We want to show new players, community members, the facets of the title we adore. We want to appreciate the humor of botch players, watching all of skilled professional players. Read articles that help us climb the ladder, discuss the nuance of viewability, interactions, members of the competitive community. We look forward to assisting you, blah, blah. That's meaningless less paragraphs, basically, just like hey, let's work together, right? So this petition has been signed, right? But more importantly, this petition specifically has been, I think Monty specifically said that, this has been backed by a lot of different, pro players, content creators, and stuff like that. I want to be frank with you, I support this main thing, mainly because I like seeing high quality content overall. I don't like seeing repetitive GIFs on the front page, right? So I'm not, and as I mentioned before, in my opinion, high quality content is not just competitive esports related articles, but it's also content like fan art, right? Or people, like, for example, if you put a lot of time creating like a music video or something like that, or like a frag movie, I think that should actually be boosted over like a GIF, right? So as you can see, this petition is not perfect, right? As I just broke it down section by section, this petition has a lot of holes in it, right? This petition could have been crafted a little better, and the fact that it was backed, everyone knows the fact that it was backed by two people who are heavily involved in the competitive community in Overwatch actually caused a lot of friction, right? Where people specifically are looking at this as Monty making the effort, using his name specifically to bully the people are our Overwatch. Our Overwatch currently is concerned by the fact that esports content and the way that they're seeing it, and this is kind of what I want to phrase where our Overwatch community is potentially in the wrong, that they're seeing this petition as, they're reading between the lines, and admittedly, they're not wrong in reading between the lines, because effectively the only reason why this conversation is happening is because we're not seeing enough esports content on the main subreddit, right? Which is honestly, and I'm gonna be frank about this, that's actually why. That's actually the flat reason why this is occurring is because the vast majority of the professional community believes that the our Overwatch subreddit, which has such a massive, we said before, is 10 times the size of the competitor subreddit, isn't using its influence to promote the competitive scene of this game like the other subreddits are doing. So that's effectively the reason why this petition is made. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Monty and Harsha can come in and tell me specifically, hey, that's not true. But from what I've been seeing, that's actually the reason why a lot of pros have been signing on to this specifically. So the people from Overwatch are not incorrect. However, the way that they're seeing this is saying that they're reading this petition and saying, oh, what you guys want to do is artificially inflate the exposure that some of these articles get because they're addressing a certain topic, right, which is hard to consume. That's what our Overwatch community is saying, and that's why they're against it. That's actually a very reasonable argument to make on the basis that, if you're very ideological about Reddit, what you're basically saying is what's upvoted most, should be, that's the spirit of Reddit, is that what's upvoted should be visible, right? So if your content's not being upvoted, clearly you're not making it in a way where people are enjoying it, or more people aren't enjoying it, right? So you shouldn't get exposure over something that other people do enjoy. The other side of the argument, the petition side of the argument, stating that well, we're not arguing about, for example, we're not saying that we want to get rid of all of the content. We're actually not even talking about esports content at all. We're just saying in general, high quality content needs to have better avenues to get in there. And one way they're proposing this is saying, let's get rid of the low quality content, right? And by getting rid of the low quality content, I mean let's put the GIFs and self posts and stuff like that, force them to click into the self post and then click in again. So it's not super easy to just click open a tab and oh, that's cool, upvote, right? You actually have to go navigate, do a few more. It's more tedious to do it. And that's what they're talking about. If they go and that's proven, get rid of low quality content, inherently better content will rise to the top because you're getting rid of all the junk, right? So even things like fan art and mixes, which are kind of high quality content that might be less easy to consume than GIFs or something like that, right? Those things will rise to the top. So effectively, a rising tide will raise all boats. So not only will esports content rise up because it's high quality content, but also some other examples of high quality content like videos or how-to guides will also rise up as well. So they're using this opportunity to do the entire concept of a rising tide lifts all boats, because hey, if we get rid of all the lower content, hey, yeah, the high quality content, which does not necessarily include esports, will also rise. But esports will also be more visible, which is what they're trying to approach. So with that being said, that's where the contention is being held. Now, I'm not going to specifically say how I feel about it, but I will ask and give some suggestions as to what people can specifically do to make this a lot easier, to satisfy both sides and come to a compromise. So primarily, I do think one of the biggest things that needs to be done is that there needs to be some way for the main subreddit to promote the competitive scene. And I think that's important, right? Because I do think a large portion of Overwatch of any game is, in effect, is competitive atmosphere. And I think that Blizzard also, it has the same idea of using our Reddit Overwatch to promote its competitive nature. That's pretty apparent. I don't think that's a secret to anyone, but Blizzard also wants to use this as a medium to promote its new venture in the Overwatch League, right? So I do think there needs to be ways to promote the competitive subreddit. As we can see here, realistically, they're not doing a bad job, right? So they are, as you can see here, there is in the right toolbar, there is example of many tournaments that are occurring, right? But this isn't very readable. I'm gonna be honest. This is actually very hard to consume because I had to go look through and read the descriptions of this. It's not very obvious who's playing, right? It's hard to do. Furthermore, there's not exactly a link to in any of these to, for example, the competitive Overwatch page is just not available on here, right? There's not a lot of other groups. For example, if we look at competitive Overwatch. There's actually I think for example subreddits, associated subreddits, right? So you can actually go here and you can click on other avenues here, and this is the main one, right? However, in the Overwatch one, there's not actually an example of related subreddits. So for example, you can't actually navigate. People who go to the business site a lot actually might not ever know that there is an example of competitive Overwatch, right? And another example would be if we went to the League of Legends subreddit. If we go to this subreddit in particular, right, we can actually see more resources, right? Resources Liga Meta, which is like a different one, related subreddits, right? And there's a way to go here and find all this information that's very detailed, part of the culture, right? Overwatch doesn't have that. So that would be one of the best benefits to do initially. I think that's the one that everyone's pretty leaning on. Hey, just give us a link. Give us a way to get exposure using the 700,000 people that you visit every day. Just find a way to let us get exposure on that one. The second one is a little difficult, but I would say make people who want to see esports content, make them have an easier time to access it. This filter, so as you can see here, people will say, well, actually, it's really easy. You could just use the subreddit filters. These subreddit filters I've discussed with a mod for our Overwatch. These filters are busted on a CSS level, right? So this is specifically for Reddit, Reddit as a whole, right? The way Reddit works is that these filters do not work on the entire feed. So what it does is it doesn't, when you specifically filter, it's not condensing the feed into like, oh, everything on your feed is everything in Overwatch in the past few pages. What it's actually doing is that specifically it is filtering on the page itself. So I'm going to show you an example of this, right? So, I already messed up. But anyway, so for example, if I want to, right, watch more esports related content, I'm going to filter out the highlights, right? So already this is kind of busted because the fact that this disappears from here, the side of the menu, to up here is not a very visible change. But let's say I want to get rid of highlights, right? I want to get rid of consoles, right? I want to get rid of fan content, right? I want to get rid of humor. Then I want to get rid of news discussions, right? So realistically, all I should be seeing is esports content and stuff that's not necessarily tagged that way, right? Well, it looks like we see one esports piece of content, right? So the average person will be seeing like, well, hey, this is actually an example of there's not that much esports content on the subreddit, right? That's like, you guys aren't even trying to do this, right? Actually, it's incorrect, because if we scroll to the next page, we actually notice that, there's actually more content we didn't see on the first page, right? So Blizzard official, this is empty, and this is like, basically as we scroll further away, we realize that, and it's pretty obvious and apparent, that these filters are not working the way that we think they are, right? Realistically, this is an esports content, and I've just scrolled like basically 5 pages in, and we finally get another esports post, right? What these filters are doing is they're filtering on the specific page. So basically what's going on is that it's not saying like, oh, esports content or all content is being condensed into a single feed the way that the first 25 posts are, right? It's not taking into account, it's not grabbing the first 25 posts of esports related and putting them on a single screen. It's basically saying we're filtering per screen. You actually have to scroll through each of these to get through esports content. That's not how the filter, it is how the filter is built to work, and that is an intent. That's a feature, not a bug. But however, that's not the expected behavior of what the filter should be doing. So realistically, hopefully Reddit can fix that and help us get more exposure on that end. So that's like one of my things on the wish list. That's not something that's easy to fix. That's a Reddit-wide issue, but that's something on that end, right? So as we just mentioned, that's actually one of the other things. And I hinted at kind of another one of my worries in the first place, right? Is that there is a weird negative influence, negative promotion cycle, right? Basically, day one, let's say there are a lot of people who are eager about contributing esports to our Overwatch subreddit, right? So they post all these esports articles, right? And none of it gets traction, none of it makes it to the front page, right? That actually discourages a lot of people from posting esports content, right? So basically, that number will decrease. Now, what behavior does that have? Well, what basically it causes is a lot of people to say, hey, there's no esports content on this page at all, right? That clearly means that, the subreddit isn't working as properly. It's not showing any esports content. Well, the reality is it's compounded, right? Not only is esports content probably not rising to the top, there's actually not a lot of esports content to begin with that's being posted on this site, right? For example, I looked on, I think like 2 days ago when it was the Apex games were going on with like Fnatic and Cloud9. There wasn't even like a match post that was highly upvoted or even lowly upvoted. I actually couldn't even find a match post at all. That means that people actually aren't even posting esports content on here, which is causing people to actually come across as kind of a little whiny in a way, right? Because people are complaining, hey, how come our esports content isn't getting more exposure on this site? And then if you actually look at it, there's actually not much esports content that's being posted on this subreddit at all, actually. So it's kind of like saying, like, people are complaining that they're not being included in the discussion, but at the same time, they're not participating in the discussion. It's like, hey, how come my participation rate is so low? I don't go to class, but how come it's so low, right? It's like, dude, like, it's because you're not going to class. You're not being involved in discussion at all. That's why there's not enough exposure, right? But that still doesn't, that logic doesn't apply necessarily to why, because as we've shown above, there's still a flaw in the ideology of how Reddit is being addressed, right? So inherently, that while that argument does work on some avenues, it's not foolproof. There is a fallacy in which that basically, hey, that's, you can't use that as a catch-all, right? Because there are examples of esports content, right, that's not getting a lot of exposure, right? And it's not getting to the top because it's hard to consume content, right? Okay. So in conclusion, this is really what the petition, why it's causing such a big division in the communities, right? One, it's because people are assuming that the petition created by Monte Cristo and Harsha is effectively negatively, and they're trying to strong arm the Overwatch community into changing the way that it is. It's basically, they feel that the petition is trying to artificially inflate esports content, right? And basically the logic people are using is that that's not the ideology of Reddit. Reddit is highest upvote goes up, right? In order to get esports content up there, you need to either create easier to consume content or easier to consume high quality content to make it up here. So basically what they're saying is that, hey, you guys aren't producing good enough content for it to go up, which I think is an important discussion for content creators to actually talk about from the competitive community. I think the discussion, it needs to be had within the competitive community to say, how do we reach out to the casual player, right? In addition, the argument's also being made that, hey, the average player isn't interested in esports, right? Which is, then again, building more onto the artificial inflation of this thing, right? If the vast majority of people aren't interested in esports, right, what role does the esports side of Overwatch have on the main subreddit, right? It's basically like saying, hey, let's promote a minority opinion, right, because we think it's important, all right? A discussion to have there. However, at the same time, the petition has been aggressively misconstrued. As I mentioned before, there is reading the petition at face value and then reading into information that's not there, right? I'm of the opinion that Monty and Harsha specifically worded this in a way such that they were specifically addressing all high quality content, right? Fact of the matter is that might not be true, but I like to think, that that's their actual intention, is that's what they wanted to do. However, I think that people have misconstrued it, have read too much in the lines, and effectively because because shitting on this petition probably is a lot easier to agree with from our Overwatch side, if people are reading, incorrect or news that's very biased, they might willing to upvote it because if they see the members of our Overwatch community are saying, oh, someone's trying to take over. No, we don't like that. We like this opinion. They might be misinformed about what it is, and you can watch Harsha's video on that as well because I think he made a pretty good point about that. So that's the end of my discussion. I think that people need to be more proactive. I did sit down with a mod and talk about some small improvements that could be made. But at the same time, that is my unbiased look at this petition, and you can pull from it what you like. This video is an hour, and it's an hour of me discussing specifically, breaking down this petition and trying to analyze what the ideology is and give you guys a better information sense of this. And yes, this is a very long video because that's how nuanced this entire petition thing is and how important it is to grasp the concepts that are underneath it. So if anything, this is an educational video. All I'm doing producing the video is to kind of educate you guys on the issue, as well as, hey, if we do make progress forward, you guys have more productive conversations. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. And if you guys watched to all the way to the end of the video, props to you guys. Thank you guys so much. But yeah, let me know how you guys feel. And of course, this video is just made for fun on my part. Just a casual video. But let me know if you guys want to see more of this. And you guys can reach me on Twitter at Scr1be's with a 1 instead of an I. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys later.